When people are confronted with the truth, one of the first things you'll notice is something strange. Even those who understand it don't always act on it. They can see clearly, and still hesitate. They know what's right, and yet they don't do it. That pause isn't usually ignorance. It's fear. Fear can be louder than facts. In oppressive systems, truth is not just information. Truth becomes a threat to the structure that controls daily life. When people finally understand the real story, who benefits, who suffers, what's being hidden, their minds run into a danger signal. If I change something, I might lose everything. And in many systems, that loss is not hypothetical. It can be employment, safety, reputation, family stability, physical security, or freedom itself. So fear of change often looks like delay, confusion, or compromise. It looks like, I'll wait until it's safer, or, I don't want to get involved, or, this is too big for me. But underneath, it's a nervous system response. The body remembers consequences. Oppressive systems train people to associate right action with punishment. They create a pattern where speaking up leads to retaliation, where protest leads to loss, where honesty leads to isolation. Over time, people learn to treat courage as reckless. They internalize the system's logic and begin to police themselves. That's why denial is so common. Denial is not always stubbornness, it can be self-preservation. If accepting the truth means admitting you've been living inside a lie, then accepting it can feel like emotional death. You might lose your identity, your community standing, or your inner sense of coherence. So the mind protects itself by keeping the truth at arm's length. There's another fear too, the fear of becoming responsible. When you see the truth, you also see what it asks from you. And many oppressive systems are designed so that action feels like it belongs only to heroes, not ordinary people. People think, my involvement won't matter, or, if I speak, I'll be blamed, or, if I act, I'll make it worse. That belief protects the system because it convinces good people to stay small. Oppression also uses social fear, fear of being ostracized. People don't just fear punishment by authorities, they fear rejection by neighbors, friends, and coworkers. In many contexts, conformity becomes a survival skill. If a person speaks the truth, they risk becoming difficult, unstable, or not one of us. The system doesn't need to imprison everyone if it can make people voluntarily silent. And then there is the fear of uncertainty. Change means crossing into the unknown. Oppressive systems keep people comfortable with predictability, even when that predictability is painful. It's predictable pain. People know where the boundaries are, what rules to follow, which risks to avoid. When the truth arrives, the old map breaks. People feel unmoored. That's why oppressive systems often thrive. They make freedom feel like chaos. They portray reform as dangerous, as naive, as irresponsible. They cast truth-tellers as reckless. The mind hears that narrative and clings to the familiar, even if the familiar is morally wrong. Spiritually grounded, we can describe this as a struggle between two inner forces. One force is fear, contraction, protection, survival. The other is conscience, expansion, alignment, integrity. When truth enters, conscience tries to move you toward action. Fear tries to freeze you. In oppressive systems, fear wins more often because the system has engineered consequences to make freezing feel safer. But here's the crucial point. Fear doesn't mean you're weak. Fear is evidence that you're human and that the system has been functioning through threat. The goal isn't to shame yourself for hesitating. The goal is to understand the mechanism. So what helps? First, you shrink the step. Oppressive systems make action feel like a total transformation. If I speak, I must uproot everything. That's overwhelming. Fear loves overwhelming. So you respond by making the action small and repeatable. A small act can be safe enough to do. A safe enough step builds courage through experience, not through fantasy. Second, you move with community. Fear isolates. Oppression relies on isolation. When you act alone, you feel exposed. When you act with others, you feel held. Even if you're cautious, you can create a supportive container where truth doesn't have to become a solitary weapon. Third, you separate truth from identity. Sometimes people hesitate because they don't only fear punishment, they fear becoming a different person. They fear losing their status, their image, their place. But when you treat truth as a practice rather than a label, you can change without erasing yourself. You can be the same person, just more aligned. Fourth, you practice inner steadiness. Spiritual discipline here is not abstract. It's learning to stay present while the body reacts. It's learning to feel the fear without letting it steer. Presence creates a gap between impulse and action. In that gap, you can choose the right step instead of the safe step that keeps the lie alive. Lastly, you remember that in oppressive systems, the absence of action is also an action. Silence maintains power. Complicity stabilizes cruelty. Even if your hesitation feels protective, it often helps the structure that harmed others. That doesn't mean you must rush into danger. It means you must be honest about what your inaction participates in. So the fear of change is not simply personal weakness. It's a predictable response to engineered threat, punishment fear, identity fear, uncertainty fear, social fear, and the fear of responsibility. Truth confronts the mind, but fear confronts the body. And the turning point comes when conscience learns to breathe with fear instead of being dragged by it.